life is good, eternal life is better. Eternal life is better, life is good, eternal life is better, life is good, eternal life is
Welcome to The Road. The Road is a radio Christian variety show, and I say that because if you're a fan of television, I'm just going to go ahead and say it. They stole my idea and made a TV show called The Road, but I'm positive that I don't have it trademarked, and I'm sure they do, so I'm also sure that the networks aren't worried about my little radio show. You're listening to The Road. I'm Eric Bombeck, by the way. My guest today is Martin Mawyer. He's the founder of the Digital Intelligence Project and the president of the Christian Action Network, and he has all kinds of thoughts today on artificial intelligence, persecution of the Christian church. So it's an interesting conversation with Martin Mawyer. So listen in to my interview with Martin Mawyer here on The Road. Martin Mawyer, how are you today? Yeah, I appreciate you joining me on the show. You are the founder of the Digital Intelligence Project, and we'll get into that in a little bit. Also, the president of the Christian Action Network. You know, I see stories about Christians being slaughtered, really, in Nigeria, and there's lots of stuff going on. And then there's lots of political things going on with Christians. Chicago Bulls waved their guard for talking about his Christian faith last week, which was kind of shocking. And so you wrote, in response to all this, you wrote The New Cost of Religious Belief. Tell me about the article and what you see is going on around the world.
Well over a decade of bit by bit trying to get to Christians, trying to punish them for what they say, what they believe, and they have been happening sporadically throughout the country. But what I began to realize last week when I wrote the article, because three events occurred at the same time, that this isn't something that's just in the United States. It's happening around the world, and it's picking up. And the whole goal of this effort is to make sure Christians are silenced. And that's the overriding objective here. So I point out several cases that were in the news. One took place in Finland, where Pavi Rasanen, that she was a former party leader of the Christian Democrats in Finland for almost a decade, or a little over a decade, actually. She was also the Minister of the Interior of Finland as well for about 4 years. You would think that if she was to write a pamphlet and put it up on Amazon or online about how God created man and woman, that above everybody, they wouldn't touch her. But they did, and they prosecuted her because that was offensive to people who believed in lesbian, gay sex, or that you could change your identity. So they prosecuted her, and they won that case because she made that pamphlet available online. And then you have the family in Sweden. These are Christian parents out there, and their name were Daniel and Bianca Sampson. They have a couple of daughters, and those daughters are now removed from their home because in Sweden they view the parents to be religious extremists. And one of the criteria that they cited to show that they were extremists is that they go to church 3 times a week. Imagine that, going to church 3 times a week.
That's how I grew
makes
up.
you religious extremists out there.
Right, that's how I grew up. Go ahead.
Yeah. So then I read this article about in Canada. Now, Canada had a law, it's still on the books, that it's a crime to make a hate speech directed at a person. But the current law says that if it is based on your religious belief, you are exempt from that law. Well, they now have passed the law in the legislature that removes that protection for Christians and other people of faith. So now if you make a statement that offends someone that could be considered a hate speech, you can be prosecuted in the country of Canada if the Prime Minister signs it into law, which he probably will. And then in the United States, in the NBA, as you kind of hinted at here, Jaden Ivey, he's the point guard for the Chicago Bulls, he made a post that criticized the NBA for celebrating gay pride and expressed his religious viewpoints on that. And after he did that, he was waived by the Chicago Bulls. And what I'm seeing here, and I wanted to point out, is a pattern that it's not just courts, it's not just state governments, it's corporations, it's all of them together who want to punish Christians for the mild things that they're doing, relatively mild compared to what, the leftists are out there doing and acting up. And what's the overall goal here? And I wanted to point out that the overall goal, it's not necessarily that they want to put you in jail or fine you. The overall goal is much deeper than that. They want to silence you. They want to make you afraid that if you say something, that you express your religious viewpoint, that you may face prosecution, you may go to jail, you may pay a fine, you may lose your job. And there's something deeper than that, Eric, because we hear things like, oh, well, if I say this, I may get prosecuted. I might go to jail. But it runs deeper than that, because now you got to come up with attorney fees. You got months of your life stolen from you fighting this court battle, which could take a year or longer out of your life. You also have to deal now with the public image of what you did. You're in the news now. People are tainting your reputation. So it's not just the punishment that you have to face. You have to face the process. And it's the process they know you want to avoid.
If you just happen to be tuning in, I'm here with Martin Mawyer. He is the founder of the Digital Intelligence Project and president of the Christian Action Network. Would you say, Martin, that since these aren't just organic or don't seem to be organic movements in separate countries, that since it's happening in a somewhat of a worldwide fashion, that this attack is spiritual in nature?
Absolutely, it's spiritual in nature. Eric, a number of years ago when we did a film called Europe's Last Stand, and we went to Europe to film about how Islam was basically running over all of Europe, we talked to a lot of people out there who were expressing how much they would love to live in the United States because of the constitutional protections we have, the free speech rights that we have. Because over there, at that time, this is like, almost 15 years ago,
right,
they were losing their jobs, and they were getting fined by their governments in whatever country they were in for making comments about Islam. And I thought, well, yeah, you're right. It would be good to live in the United States. We love it there because we have those protections. But now I look at it and go, wow, we are undergoing what Europe has been undergoing for at least 2 decades now in its coming year. So to me, it's sort of a grand strategy. It worked there, so let's make it work here. And we have to have our eyes open about this, because if we become like Europeans, and that is self-censoring themselves, and they do that a lot over there for obvious reasons, then we're going to lose the battle for the kingdom. Because Christ did not tell us to be silent. He told us to go up to the rooftops and shout. And we can shout in many different ways. Sometimes it's just us taking a stand. Sometimes it's us resisting. Sometimes it's us actually opening our mouth and speaking truth. But that's what we're supposed to do. We're not supposed to self-censor ourselves and run and hide.
I'm here with Martin Mawyer. Do you? I think, Martin, that I liked it better when I didn't know all my friends' political and religious views. I think it feels like social media has changed the landscape of politics. And do you attribute a lot of this to social media? Because I think back in the day, you said something in a pub and then nobody heard it. Now you're saying it on the internet and the world can see it. Is that fashioning what's happening partly?
Well, I think, you bring up social media, but social media has been proving my point here. I remember 15 years ago, we would post an article up on Facebook, let's say Facebook, and we would get just tons of comments, tons of likes. We get tons of hates. We get a lot of shares. Nowadays, you're lucky if you get 3 or 4 likes. you get hardly any shares anymore, and forget comments. People don't comment on the stuff that we talk about. And the reason why is they're scared to.
Yep.
They're scared that 10 years
True.
from now, it's going to come back and haunt them in
Yep.
their employment, even if they just like a post. So that silencing has been going on for quite some time. So social media has added to that silencing effect among Christians and conservatives.
Do you think that, I mean, I know that I've talked to a lot of different people from a lot of different organizations over the last 5 years at least, who also believe that there's some shadow banning going on, that the stuff you're putting out isn't really getting out like it used to.
Well, there's shadow banning out there. There's no question about that. And I want to speak, this is going to sound weird coming from my point of view, and a little bit of defense about the shadow banning stuff, because what Google and all of them, Facebook, are trying to do is to tone things down. So it's shadow banning because they know that certain conversations spark a lot of activity that can become sounding very volatile in nature on their platform, and they want to avoid that type of conversation. It's unfortunate that people consider just simple things we say about our religious belief creates such an emotional response from people, but it's not as if they don't want us to be able to say what we want to say. They just know the consequence of what's going to happen on their platform if they do. So we can either take a look at it and go, oh, they're directly coming after us, they don't like us, they're trying to shut us up, or, which I really believe is the case, it's all self-interest. They don't want it on there because it drives people off the platform, and that's not what they're in the business about. They're in the business of keeping people on the platform, not getting fed up with it and hitting that button and going off and doing something else. They want you to stay there.
I'm here with Martin Mawyer, who's the founder of the Digital Intelligence Project. What is that, Martin?
Well, we've developed this is a great opportunity to plug that. So if you go to our website at christianaction.org, at the top of the page, you can subscribe to our Patriot Majority Report newsletter, because we carry a lot of things about the current developments of artificial intelligence and how it affects you personally, how it affects your community, how it affects your job, and more importantly, how it relates to end times prophecy. And we've warned people, Eric, there's so much going on with artificial intelligence right now that should scare the bejeebers out of us. And I don't
Well,
have
scare me.
all
I want you to scare me and my audience for at least a few minutes with some stuff. Regale us.
Well, my most recent article is how they're using human cells now to put into artificial intelligence. So, can you imagine the
I don't know. What do you mean? I don't understand how. Wait, I'm confused.
Artificial intelligence to make it go faster.
I don't even know what that means. What do you mean, into the computer? Into what? How would that work?
Yeah, that is kind of complicated, and they like it complicated because it's hard to explain. So all compute and AI is done by these microchips, but they have limitations. They can only process things so fast, and they've come up with this idea that if they can basically make a brain and put it into those chips, it will actually work faster and cheaper. So they're now cultivating human cells to put on top of those chips to make those computing chips actually work faster. But once you start down that road and you say, hey, taking bits and pieces of humans and using it to advance AI, then we got to question, where is all this going to end up later on? Is a robot suddenly going to be more human-like than it would not be if you weren't putting human cells into its mechanism? So that's just one of the things that we're alerting people about, but we got so many other things out there that people should be deeply concerned about, where artificial intelligence is going, where it's headed, and also we explain a lot of why it's happening this way, and whether it's malicious or whether it's just simply, hey, we want to be the top dog in the AI business, and we're going to do it this way, regardless of what dangers it might occur. And actually, that's where basically AI is headed. They're not looking at the safeguards anymore. They're not saying with caution, well, we better not do this yet because we don't know where it's going to lead. What they're actually doing is saying, oh, let's look at our competitors. Where are they at right now? Because eventually only 2 or 3 of these AI systems are going to end up on the market when it's all that over, because it's very expensive, It's a lot of compute. People are running out of money in the AI industry, and they don't want to be left behind and go bankrupt. So they're throwing caution to the wind at times and making things go faster than I think basically humanity is willing to accept and could possibly understand. But anyway, you can get that information off of our newsletter, and you'll find a lot of back articles that explore all kinds of things about how Musk is going to put computer centers out in outer space. And so therefore all AI will basically be connected to, his satellites in outer space. And the question is, well, now who controls those satellites? What happens if it gets into the wrong hands? That person will have great power over every AI system in the entire world. And we talk about these things and we warn people.
I had the opportunity to have a couple of different transhumanists on the show, and even a Christian transhumanist, if you can gather that. And from my listening audience, there is a movement, and has been around for quite a while in the science and science fiction fields, that ultimately that man would end up being like, if you look at Star Trek Next Generation, like Commander Data, who was he sentient, or was he a robot, or was he a person? But it seems to me, from what you're saying, they can put brain cells on a chip. Then maybe they can put a chip in your brain. And that is the goal of a lot of the transhumanists, as you know, Martin, is for people to sidestep God and to say, well, did God, the original lie in Genesis was, did God really say we were going to die? And go ahead.
Eric, they're already putting chips in people's brains.
Yeah,
you're a little bit behind on that.
Well, no, I know.
So, yeah, they're already putting these chips into people's brains. And they can actually help people on the outside, looking at your brain, reading what your thoughts are. It's amazing what they're up to and what they can do with these chips nowadays.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Elon has the thing where you can connect to the internet with just your brain now, or connect it directly in for people who are paralyzed. But it sounds like that to me. And you talk about prophecy, it sounds to me like that we are in most prophetic pastors. In this show, I do a lot of prophecy on this show, Martin. You and I didn't talk about that before we got together here, but it seems to me that most prophetic pastors are saying that we are certainly seem to be on the very cusp of at least the beginning of the end times now. Any thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, I have a lot of thoughts on that, but AI certainly is the infrastructure, I believe, for the coming Antichrist. When you talk about a beast that somehow has control over 200 nations at one time, right now that would be impossible to even think about how that could happen. But with artificial intelligence, you actually could control every nation in the world at one time. And if you wanted to make sure that Christians could not buy or sell, well, that infrastructure is being built right before our eyes.
Yeah, for the listeners who might not be familiar, the Bible makes a prophecy that the one day during the tribulation period that most people know this, that there will be an Antichrist, and that without the mark or the man or the mark of the man, 666, that you won't be able to buy or sell. And of course, has not been possible until we get into the AI phase here. Especially, Martin, what you're saying about them putting human brain cells merging. That is the transhumanists really their goal, is it not?
Oh, yeah. Well, there's a lot of people out there that's trying to upend society, Eric, and it's shocking. If people could see all of what's going on under the hood, it would probably scare the bejeebers out of them. Sometimes I look at it, I have people say, hey, stop sending me this stuff. You're scaring me. I can't get out from underneath my bed. And I can understand why, because it's actually, some of this stuff is quite terrifying. One of the things in AI developments that really shocked me was its now ability to have, if one robot learns a skill, every robot in the world can now learn that same skill. And that should make us all very concerned. So as an example, say a robot learns how to make pizza in a pizza joint. Well, another similar robot in a hospital that normally takes blood tests will instantly know how to make a pizza at the same time. So one robot that knows how to defend itself and attack you, in one case, every robot will not know how to do that. So when we look at AI and where it's headed, and especially when we're talking about physical AI, and what I mean by that, physical AI are the robots out there and other things that do chores for you in a mechanical way, where chatbots is sort of like language model AIs. So when we look at physical AIs and we say that when one robot can learn one thing, every robot in the world is going to be able to learn that exact same skill, that should concern us. Because one thing we do know about the androids that are out there right now, if they do go haywire, you can't turn them off. There is no off button on them. The only way to turn them off is to take their battery out, and you can't take the battery out either unless you are the mechanic that knows how to take that battery out. So now you're at the mercy of a rogue robot, and there's not a thing you can do. So you can imagine if you were an antichrist and you had the control of every robot in the world at your disposal, what that would mean. And, you know, Elon Musk says that within 20 years, there's going to be more robots in the world than there are people in the world. Now, normally we would laugh at that, but if it comes from Musk, you better believe it's likely to happen, because he makes wild predictions all the time that 5 years later, he made a rocket land vertically. People laughed at him when he said that. So when he says more robots than humanity, we ought to need to pick up our attention and say, well, what does that mean for us?
I'm here with Martin Mawyer. Lots of amazing things going on in the world, to be sure. You wrote, I think you wrote a book called Inside the Kingdom of the Beast. What was that about, Martin?
I think you're referring to. I've written so many books. Sometimes I even forget the titles of the names of that book. But it's called "When Evil Stops Hiding."
That's it,
and that's Inside the Kingdom of the Beast. So the name of the book is "When Evil Stops Hiding." So that's what talks about how there's all these underground dark web organizations out there. Prominently speaking, 764. Remember that name, 764, who have this ability to go in and wreak havoc with little kids. That's what their goal is. They go in, they get these kids locked in through different channels, and it could be a simple channel such as playing one of your normal Roblox games. They lock you in, then they get you to do some strange activities, and that could be being nude, it could be branding yourself, it could be cutting yourself, it could be actually be killing your pet cat, it could be do a bomb threat to your local school.
Wow.
And then when they get you to do that, they film it, and then they put it up in what's called these like little tiers of folders for other people inside 764 to go look at what you got this little child to do. And then they have tiers that are above that. So the more gross thing that you can produce, you get into the higher level tiers. Now you say 764, never heard of them, but the FBI says there's over 100,000 members of 764 around the world. And just because they don't live in the United States doesn't mean you should not be concerned, because most of the victims are in the United States, because they don't have to live here to get to your child.
Well, there's some crazy stuff going on in the world, to be sure. How do people connect with you, Martin?
Yeah, please go to our website. And the best way to connect is subscribe to our newsletter. We actually today released an 8-part series on the Department of Justice, released this morning an 800-page document about how Biden's Department of the Justice was weaponized to go after pro-lifers. And so we take that 800-page report, we break it down, we tell some fascinating things. One of the more fascinating things in that report is how in the prosecution of one pro-lifer, the Department of Justice would not let Christians serve on the jury because of their religious beliefs, or what we started our conversation off about.
That's unbelievable. And so you're screening, it seems to me, the antithesis of what the Democratic idea of a jury was founded on. Unbelievable. Oh, hey, man, listen, yeah. I appreciate you being on the show. What would you like to say before we go?
Well, I want to encourage people to go to it and sign up for it. It doesn't cost you anything. It's free. And stay informed. And you get our podcasts. You get many other little bells and whistles that we offer. We have music up there. We have films up there. You can watch them all. You can watch them on your home TV as well. So
give the address again, please.
ChristianAction.org.
Christian Action.
That's correct.
Got it. Hey, man, I really appreciate you and appreciate you being on the show.
Thanks, Eric, for having me back on. I appreciate being here.
My thanks to Martin Mawyer for being on the show. Appreciate him. You can listen to the show on this station each week at this time. It's on a couple different stations in around Mercer County, and then it's also on Spotify and YouTube, usually within a week after when it airs on terrestrial radio. The show is called The Road, if you're looking it up. The Road with Eric Bombeck. I talk a lot about prophecy and have for a long time and studied it all my life, but I think that we are in a very accelerated time right now, especially with what's going on in AI. It was kind of a shocker tonight. I hadn't heard what Martin said tonight about them taking human cells, I'm assuming brain cells, and connecting them to microchips. Because we've talked a lot about them taking microchips and connecting them to our brains. But to take individual brain, I'm assuming brain cells, and to connect them to chips, because that's what those cells were designed to do, was move information. And if you can take something organically and put it onto a chip and it's cheaper and quicker and faster, do it. But the question is then, what are the ethical implications of that? Are we eventually going to raise humans so that in a lab, so that, or just brains rather, in a lab, so that we can harvest those brains and put them onto microchips, so that we can all have a great life and all have our phones can be faster. But it begs the question of what's going to be moving forward, how things are going to shake out, because we don't have a lot of companies that are doing AI. It's not like the days of old. I've studied a lot, or written stories. I just shouldn't say studied. Written stories about a lot of businesses in Pennsylvania. I have a little newspaper that I publish, historical newspaper, and most of those guys were just Presbyterians. The guys, a lot of businesses started in Pennsylvania. A lot of old businesses, Murphy's and all those different kinds of stores. Those guys had Judeo-Christian values, and what they said was that we need to do the right thing by the customer, and they'll come back and shop with us. It's the golden rule. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. But now we're dealing with globalist companies who don't really have those same Western Judeo-Christian values at all. Foreign to them. Not even something that they would think about first, like, what is this okay for the customer? So a lot of times conservatives, people like myself, are skeptical of things like vaccines and different things partly because these companies that are coming, AstraZeneca and these companies, Bayer, coming out of Germany, we don't really have any faith in that they're doing the right thing and have the will or even desire to do the right thing. So that's where we are. So when it comes to AI, I think that we have crossed into a area that is really mostly beyond man's ability to understand right now. We really, really don't understand what we're playing with and what the ramifications could be. Because of that, one of the many, 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 many dozens and dozens of reasons that prophetic preachers now are saying we are entering into an end times period. That could be a year, it could be 20. But it all moves so quickly now. But there's going to come a time, I believe, where God's going to say, enough is enough. Just like what happened during the first flood, the flood. The iniquity in the world was so great. But I don't even believe that it has to be the iniquity in the world is so great. Because there's always been iniquity in the world. But we are at a point in history where we can begin to, in essence, play God. And as I said those words, the thunder here outside the studio just rattled the windows. It's pretty interesting. But we're at the point now where you can, we've talked about it, but we're really, really at the point now where artificial intelligence rather, is going to change the face of mankind. Most people are saying, the people that really know and understand it are saying within 10 to 20 years, nothing will be the same. Nothing. Everything will be different. So we're really coming into a new era. But let me say this to you. God will only allow in his providential will what he will allow. And there'll come a time where he'll say enough is enough. At that time period, if you have already put your faith in his son, in Jesus, you're going to get to go to heaven and be with God forever, for all of eternity. If you haven't put your faith in his son, you go somewhere else for all of eternity. I'm out of time. You know what I always say? It's time for me to hit the road.